I had just completed a long shift at my dead-end job and found myself in need of groceries, so I decided to visit a local supermarket that had recently opened, its brightly lit aisles beckoning like a siren's call. The excitement of their grand opening still lingered in the air, filled with gentle chatter and the clinking of shopping carts, and I filled mine with staples, bread, eggs, some fruits and vegetables, and even a few indulgent snacks since it was the weekend, and by the time I reached the checkout line, I felt an odd mix of exhaustion and a sweet sense of reward for my small endeavor. I unloaded my items onto the conveyor belt, watching the cashier scan each one with the robotic precision typical of a store employee, but the moment she reached for the last item, a carton of ice cream, the screen displayed a stunningly low total of just $12.47. A tight knot of confusion tightened in my stomach. I had to double-check the calculator in my head, considering that my cart was spilling over with goods, easily a couple $100 worth, and when I questioned this blaring error, the cashier smiled dejectedly, muttering that her register had been acting strange all night. The words left her lips like wisps of smoke, and instead of looking into it, she casually shrugged as she hit the total button, confirming the price instead of investigating, just smiling a little too broadly as if she too were bewildered by this bizarre windfall. My heart raced. This had to be some sort of mistake, but the idea of walking out of the store paying next to nothing for 2 full carts of groceries was intoxicating, so I stalled, considering my options as I fought against a gnawing guilt while pushing the doubts aside like a summer breeze. A second cashier glanced our way, her face a mask of indifference, and suddenly I became acutely aware of unseen eyes watching, as if the store itself held its breath, waiting for my decision. "Are you sure?" I asked, feeling almost dizzy. And her smile faded as she repeated the total with a hint of impatience, insisting that it was the system that was wrong, not her. Driven by an overwhelming surge of greed, I paid, feeling a rush of adrenaline as I left the store, groceries in hand, the fluorescent lights of the supermarket fading into the darkness of the parking lot. In that blissful moment, I felt like I had cheated the system, imagining how much I would save for rent or bills. Yet, as I started my car, a part of me twisted uncomfortably, nagging at my conscience like a distant memory, but I brushed it off, dismissing any lingering thoughts as paranoia, convincing myself that I deserved this little slice of fortune. When I arrived home, I tossed the groceries onto the kitchen counter and began to load them into the fridge, the mundane humdrum of life resuming as I filled my cupboards, but as I unpacked the bags, I noticed something odd. Strange items slipped in among my purchases. A cut of meat sealed in a bag, a bottle of thick red liquid that looked dangerously like blood, and a small, tattered notebook filled with unintelligible scrawls, the back cover smeared with what could only be described as a dark, wet stain. My pulse quickened, and I shoved them aside, sending an uneasy glance around my kitchen, but I couldn't shake that gnawing feeling in my gut that something was wrong, that I had unwittingly invited chaos into my life. The next morning, I expected the eerie sensations to pass, but they didn't. The notebook was now lying wide open on the counter, every page filled with bizarre symbols, frantic notes that obsessively detailed an almost cult-like fixation on the supermarket and the seemingly innocent items within it. I could swear the markings on the pages were shifting, rearranging themselves every time I glanced away, and it struck me that the only thing that connected them to me was that horrifyingly cheap trip to the store. For the next few days, I tried to ignore it, but I began to notice bizarre occurrences, failed electronics, shadows in the corners of my eyes, and even nightmares that began to plague my sleep, filled with screaming voices that echoed the word cherished. On the third night, something awoke me. The scratching, like nails on metal, grew louder, and when I finally mustered the courage to investigate, I discovered the shadows in my living room had congregated around the groceries I had brought home. Panic gripped me, and I stumbled backward, collapsing against the wall as they twisted together, forming a shape, a shadow that didn't belong on the earthly plane, its formless body writhing like smoke, taking on a blasphemous humanoid shape. In that moment, dread clutched my throat, and before I could scream, it surged forward, the air around it grew acrid and cold, the faint, echoing words of cherished flooding my mind like a tidal wave crashing against shoreline rocks. Harvested. Taken. Cherished. I felt flashes of all the people I'd encountered that evening in the store, the cashier's sickly sweet smile, the indifference of the second clerk, their faces burned in my memory like hellfire as I slowly understood that they were part of something sinister, their actions calculated, meant to draw me in, collecting souls to feed the entity that now cloaked my living room in a veil of darkness. I bolted for my front door, only to find it sealed, a cruel mockery of hope as I twisted the knob frantically to no avail. Instead, the dark entity laughed like crackling thunder, each sound wave sending shivers down my spine. I collapsed to the floor, tears cascading down my cheeks as I clung to the remnants of reality, realizing that the only thing I had truly paid for that night wasn't my groceries, it was my very soul, traded for a price so low that I should have seen the chasm of despair lurking behind it. But now it was too late, and all I could hear was the tortured whispers of everyone I had unknowingly condemned to share my fate, forever. Cherished in the dark echo of that store, as I faded, consumed by the shadows I had innocently invited into my life,